How deep is Philly hip hop scene really? What's up? All I'm saying is hip hop in Philly is deep. That's all I'm saying. Uh, Now you got Cornbread. Now I'm getting these from different sources. In Cornbread, I watched him say in this documentary. You can find the documentary. I think the documentary, if you go on, you'll see the trailer for it. You're not going to see the actual joint on YouTube, but you'll see the trailer, and then you gotta go to their joint, and then you gotta buy the DVD because I think they still selling it as a DVD, a hard copy. They might be selling it as a stream, but I'm just putting stuff together. Now, you got Cornbread, right? Now, I watched the documentary and I love the documentary. The documentary is good. So, this is me. I'm using quotes, not even quotes, but things that I know. And I'm speaking from the hip, but it comes from me researching and watching and reading and understanding certain things. But in the documentary, Cornbread talks about, and you got to get it. You got to get this documentary because it's dope. But I'm just putting my pieces together and I'm making my acknowledgement and what I see and know. Uh, Cornbread speaks about how when he was doing graffiti, he didn't want to be in gangs. Because if you notice, in gangs, now this is from other research, when I do my research and I look into Philadelphia's urban stuff, and I learn. In the gang era, you wrote on walls, correct? Now I wasn't back there, so I can't. Other old heads that were in gangs, they can get on YouTube and drop more knowledge. But gangs, you're writing your tags, right? Now in Philly, we know there was gang writing. Gang writing, gang graffiti is different from individualized graffiti, like the way Cornbread was doing it, and others in like Klepto Kid and all these other cats. And Philly, we had our own style of graffiti. You know what I'm saying? We did a lot of wickets, some people say top to bottom, but when I was coming up in the 80s, they were wickets. 70s, 80s, wickets. That's what I know, and I knew it was a Philly style. And I tried to learn how to do it. I would stop and learn. I learned a little, but I got a little hand. I know how to do it a little bit. I'm not a lot of guys that learn and they think they top of the line with it, and other people. But I'm talking about in our hood around the way. You had graffiti, and you had the style of graffiti, and I went to Salzburger, and we would all write our hands, and we write on pieces of paper, and we show. And you had wickets and stuff like that. So, gangster graffiti in Philly is different from individualized graffiti in Philly. And that's what made it become a hipper, musical hip-hop thing. Now, I know New York coined the name hip-hop, but what I'm showing is elements of hip-hop before the name was coined. So you could say, oh, hip-hop started in the Bronx. I get that. We're not disputing that because we understand that. But I'm trying to show you elements of hip-hop before Bronx. So Cornbread is this graffiti artist. But why did he become a graffiti artist? Because he wanted to get his name up. He says that in a lot of the YouTubes, right? So let's take that, right? Acknowledgement. And in the gangster, doing the gangster element in Philly, gangs in Philly was crazy. Like a lot of gangs, y'all know gangs from LA, and you know all that. You know that. But we already had gangs way early in Philly. Philly is a mecca, is a place that people migrated from the South and came up to Philly. And they came to Philly to live. In the 20s, W.E. Du Bois came here to Philly because it was so populated with tons of people coming to Philly. And W.E. Du Bois did an almanac. He did a whole thing, an analytical joint. Matter of fact, where's that book at? I got it right here. Right here. He did this right here, the Philadelphia Negro, right? And this was a study that was done, and this book goes back, originally published in 1899, right? Um, and just to show you how deep Philly was, and this the breakdown of Philly and the population of blacks being here in Philly. So Philly was a very populated among blacks. Tons of black people came here, right? So boom, let's move up to Cornbread. Cornbread is this young guy, right? He's this young guy, and he doesn't want to join the gang. Like tons of other black people in Philly during the gang era time. We talking the 60s, right? And there's graffiti all over Philly. This before it's graffiti all over, but Philly has graffiti on trains everywhere. And we didn't see New York doing this, because remember, nobody seen that until you got movies and Wild Style and Star Wars and all that. You ain't see that. But Philly had tons of graffiti all over Philly, on the trains everywhere, from gangs. And now here comes Cornbread going, I want to get my name up, but I don't want to be a part of a gang. Because in these gangs in Philly, it was nuts. People killing each other now in Philly, but they've been doing that back in the day. The murder rate in Philly was crazy back then, just like it's back now. It's just like when you do research and you look at the things they say, the cops and the commissioners were saying the same thing back in the 1960s, back in the 50s in Philly, that they saying now. We have to get more cops on the street, all this old hoo-hash, right? I got that from my man Chris, a.k.a. appreciate that hoo-hash, right? Let's go back to Cornbread. I got to keep coming back to Cornbread. So the gangs are popping. People getting killed. Sawed-off shotguns, zip guns, made-up guns, all kinds of stuff. Different gangs in North Philly. Calmac gang. Boom. Also, we had the Zulu gang. Zulu is a gang in Philly. It's a gang in Philly called the Zulu Nation. It's called the Zulu. I don't know if they call it the Zulu Nation. They call it the Zulu gang. Zulu, like Zulu, the warriors that fought off the British in Philly. Now it's no internet. There's no nothing in Philly in the 60s and prior to that probably. So gang members, y'all can attest to this. Cornbread don't want to be a part of that. Just like other millions, thousands of other kids in Philly during the 60s don't want to be a part of that either. But they still in the hood. That don't mean they ain't hood. They still around the way. I ain't even gonna say hood, because hood, what that word, we didn't say hood back. Around the way. Where you from? Where you from? 42nd Street gang. This one in the gangs. Cornbread is not a gangster, right? This is what he's saying in his documentary that he did. So you have to go and see that. I'm just saying, I'm putting mine together. But you have to go back and see that documentary. I suggest you go buy it. He says, I didn't want to be in a gang, but he wanted to get his name up. Now, he says this in another thing. I think Mass Appeal or some other person recorded him saying this as well, that he didn't want to be in a gang. He was trying to get his name up. It all boils down to wanting to get your name up. I want to get my name out because I want to get popular and I want people to know who I am. Boom. Let's move up now to battling. Let's take Big Star DVDs. I'm all over the place because I'm trying to make something. I'm trying to make you understand this. Big Star comes out with this whole thing where he's filming all the battles, i.e. Meek Mill, Cheek Raw, all that. What are they doing in those battles? Trying to get their name up. In Philly, it was all about always trying to get your name up through graffiti, through gangs. Who was the guy in the gangs back in the 60s? Who was the crew? Who was this? My mom can attest to that because my mom, she went with guys from North Philly, and then my mom lived in West Philly, 49th and Hoops, the Moon Gang, all these different places. And she would have parties, and they would come to her house, but she would tell them they couldn't fight at the parties. 47th and Brown Street, all around there. I'm West Philly, so we down the bottom slash in the middle between. Just making sure you understand that type of dynamic, right? So back to Cornbread. Cornbread doesn't want to be a part of the gang. He doesn't want to be part of that. So what does he do to get his name up? He goes out and starts writing on the wall. At that moment, in that time, if you do research and you know who James G. Spady is, which is a historian, He says that's when gang writing turns into individualized graffiti, which makes hip hop. Hip hop is an individualized thing of other people coming together to make up this culture we call now coin hip hop. Now, Africa Bambaataa or all whoever the people who coined that name, whatever y'all called it hip hop, but you called it that prior to something brewing and something happening. And a lot of elements of hip hop was elements in Philly. We had no idea that people were doing stuff in New York. But a lot of people of the migration, because Philly was so overpopulated from 1800s all the way up until the 60s and the 70s, people started moving out. Blacks started moving up north to New York, to the Bronx, taking elements and things with them. Because when you overpopulate it in the area, you creative. You come up with tons of stuff. You got to branch out because there's so many blacks in the neighborhood. Things are happening. Things are wilding out. You want to get out. I'm just making you understand how deep the culture and what was going on. Not the name hip-hop, not coining the name, but the culture and how things happen. I.e., me doing research through hip-hop historians, me looking at DVDs, looking at what people like Cornbread say, understanding the gang culture in Philadelphia during the 60s, understanding gang writing versus individual person that decides to get up. Now, just to make sure you understand that level, right? Let's go back to Cornbread again. Cornbread says in his joint, he talks about how he was getting his name up, but then he noticed other people doing individual graffiti writing. This is very important. And other people can attest to this. You can get online and talk to me and go in the comments. That after he was doing this graffiti, now Cornbread kind of states how he was going looking for other people, but they could never connect. Other graffiti artists, I know Klepto Kid and all these other cats would say that they couldn't meet up with each other, but then they finally found out how they could meet, and then they started noticing, oh, you so-and-so, oh, you this guy, oh, you that, oh, you Klepto Kid, oh, you this guy, right? Oh, you Cool Earl, or you these particular guys. You go online, you can see this. These different guys in Philly and graffiti, because Philly and graffiti is mad deep. Our style is beyond anybody else's. Same thing with DJing and same thing with dancing. But that's a whole nother thing. I'm just sticking with Cornbread and the graffiti-ness of the hip-hop graffiti. Because gang writing, an individualized person like Cornbread, graffiti writing, which is the first elements of hip-hop, the word, not just the word, my fault, the culture itself. Are the elements. What makes hip-hop versus gang writing is hip-hop is individualized and detached from the gang. So you're writing to get your name up, and now you're developing different styles. I.e., we had a style called Wicked in Philly. I'm from West Philly. So, you know what I mean? Everybody in Philly, North Philly, and North Philly is like, one thing I seen that Wallow said, that North Philly was like Brooklyn. But it's a reason for that, because North Philly was the central location of hipness, of ill niggas that were ill. In West Philly, I'm from West Philly, so I'm not trying to take nothing away. But North Philly had a lot of the hip dudes, where West Philly, we more were the conservative dudes pacing things together, and we dressed and had a clean-cut style. That's just West Philly. That's me. That's everybody else is from West Philly. Now, Cornbread said that they would meet up, and finally when they met up, they would kick it together, and they would be at clubhouses. In this clubhouse, you would have cats playing music, they dressing fly. This is in the 60s now, mid-60s now. Cornbread getting his name up. He's being a star by this time. In the mid-60s, he's a star. He's a graffiti star. Understand how deep this is. And the other guys are named, they getting their name up. Just like how Meek and all them was getting their name up in the battle and rapping and all that. Boom. Graffiti is a thing. Gangs are still going on. In the 60s, early 60s, mid 60s, whatever. Graffiti all over the place. This is Philly, not New York. No disrespect, but the name hip hop was coined in New York. We know how the recordings were recorded in Jersey and boom. It's just a lot of people in New York, and New York knows how to put stuff together. They are incredible with that, but I'm not going there right now. Let's don't go into that. I'm sticking with Cornbread. Cornbread says they would go meet up at a clubhouses in North Philly, and they would kick it, and they would have music. They would show each other, have a book where they showing each other their graffiti hands, and they would do rhymes and talk different ways. Now, the element of the rhyme being at these clubhouses, which is, first you had kind of doo-wop. That was a big thing, right? Now you got guys just kind of toting and doing totes and rhymes with each other, right? And an element of this, if you look at the jungle, which is 100X, 10th and Oxford, which is a rap group in Philly during the 90s called 100X, real in-depth, terrorizing, metaphorical, lyrical giants. 100X in the 90s. But The Jungle was filmed in the 60s, right? And it's a black and white joint called The Jungle. And you could see them elements in them rhyming. And they rhyming about wine. And they still saying bull in the joint. Y'all know we say bull. There's the bull over there. Blah, blah, blah. The bull. So y'all know what I'm saying. You mean? So when you look and put all that together, you ask yourself, how deep is Philly's hip hop scene? The culture. Let's don't go to the word hip hop. But how deep is Philly hip hop scene really? Y'all leave comments and let's get busy.